Welcome to Equity in Instructional Coaching. I am so excited for every webinar I've said. If you have not heard Victoria speak, you are not living your best life. And I'm saying it again, and I will say it again. So you may be like, woman, why are you so loud? And who are you? I am Dr. Desiree Alexander, and I'm loud because life is loud. And I am the founder, CEO of Educator Alexander Consulting, and I am hosting this webinar. Woohoo, everybody goes wild. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, no, you don't get the certificate, but you do get the knowledge. And right under the video in the description, you will see the resources for today. So make sure that you get those. You're not left out. You're watching the video. You're awesome. All right. So what is coming up next? We have how to launch an educational consulting business with the amazing Tina Shea Blanchett, good friend of mine. You want to come hear this, author of the brand new book, The Freelance Educator. So many teachers and educators and leaders are saying, what else can I do? Like, either to leave or to stay and have a side hustle. You want to come check this out. So how to launch an educational consulting business is next at the end of May. Then we have the Leadership Academy, virtual and free. So one day of just leaders talking to you, and it is hosted by the Louisiana Educators of Color Collective, but everyone is invited to come and hear amazing leaders of color talk about being a leader. So completely free is for, even though it's Louisiana, it's for everybody all across the world. Come and check it out. We have people from Egypt. We have people from, it's just crazy, all the registrations we have. So come and check it out. And it's the second annual one. Then we have leveraging YouTube for learning. We use YouTube all the time, but are we leveraging it for learning? Loving this topic, Michelle. And that will be June 11th. And then we have designing your digital classroom with Schoology. So if you are a Schoology user, you definitely want to come hear Dr. Will speak. And then it's ISTE. It's in NOLA. What more do you want? So ISTE 2022 is virtual and live. We get to see each other in person. I'm so happy. So I'll be there. And then we have a summer learning series with Spaces. So Spaces is kind of that hot new tool you keep hearing about, but you're like, what's that? Well, what's that, Desiree? Come find out. So Fridays in July, we're going to have a Spaces webinar series. You can go to that website, go to my website to go to their website, and you can see all of the different topics that they're going to be talking about. And then we have Ed Change Global is back, y'all. I don't even know how many years we've been doing this, but it's back, but it's going to be different. It's no longer 24 hours. We have a fresh schedule. So we have ECG after dark, and then an ECG PD day. Now, don't forget, if you want to present, you have until May 15th to turn in that presentation. And we only have 20 spots this year to present. So it's going to be tight. Make sure you get that presentation in, and of course, register to attend. Then we have immerse students in learning, exploring AR, VR, and XR. And I say this every time. I don't know what XR is, but I'm going to learn it because Rochelle is coming back and doing another session for us. Then we have start your year off right with parents by using Spaces. So we have another Spaces, but it's all about parents and having that parent communication right at the beginning, or kind of in the beginning of the school year for some of us. And then we have AI in education. AI is going to take over. We're going to be just AI people eventually. So why don't you come and learn about how AI can be used in education? And then we have increasing your ed tech footprint and influence in Morocco. What's up, Morocco? So I put the American time here to make it a little bit easier for you if you're in America. But it is by the Everyone Academy. And if you click on it, you'll see a cost, but there's not a cost. There's only a cost if you want a certificate. So it is completely free. And then we have 3 tools with English possibilities. And you may be like, is that Rochelle again? Yes, it is. She is part of the EA family, and she can come present just like Victoria and just like all of my presenters anytime they want to. So 3 tools with English possibilities coming up in November. And last but not least, we have self-paced classes. They're all active. They've all been updated. So we have the SLLA test prep and Google certifications, all kind of good stuff on there. So you may be like, Desiree, oh my gosh, you talk so fast. But remember, it's all at the same site. Everything has is at edalex.net/events. So I know you love my voice, but you didn't come to hear me speak. You came to talk about equity in instructional coaching. So let's get started.
What an introduction, Dr. Alexander. Seriously, that was awesome. And I see so many wonderful familiar faces from like Melody McAllister, Dr. Will, Rochelle. I'm like, okay, I got to sign up for some of these. This is amazing. And this is also my first time doing an EA webinar. So I'm very excited and very honored to be here with you all today. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. So hello, everybody. My name is Victoria Thompson. Extremely excited to be here with you all today. So today's session is going to be on equity in instructional coaching. As Dr. Alexander mentioned, I am on Twitter at Victoria the Tech. So please feel free to follow along, ask questions, tweet at me, do whatever you want. I am extremely friendly. So feel free to reach out, collaborate. I am down for whatever you want to do, especially given that so many educators right now are kind of thinking about what next steps are. Like, is classroom for me? Is coaching for me? Is admin for me? I am more than happy to help with that transition. So let me know how I can be helpful to you. And I always like to begin with just a little bit about me. So as I mentioned, I am Victoria Thompson. That is my name. My face is on the left-hand side. I look way better there than I do right now. But I am a proud product of New Jersey K-12 public education. So I was born and raised in Marlton, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So South Jersey, not North Jersey. I am a Seattle area resident. I do live in Tacoma, Washington, which is about 45-ish minutes to an hour outside of Seattle city center. But I'm not coming from there right now. We're actually in Cannon Beach, Oregon, where the Goonies was filmed, which is super cool. So if any of you have seen the Goonies, or if you've been to Cannon Beach or been to Oregon, period, we come here quite often, and we're really happy to be here this weekend just to relax and have some time off. My background is that in math and science education, STEM education in particular, and then also STEM coaching. So I spent about 5 to 6 years in the STEM classroom when I was in South Carolina and in Washington. I did 5th and 6th grade math and science, and then I also did high school mathematics teaching and curriculum development. So that's how I got started. I was trying to figure out what the next step for me would be. Didn't know if I wanted to go admin. Didn't really feel like going admin either. I also didn't necessarily know if I wanted to go all the way up to super or be in district leadership. So coaching for me was kind of that middle ground where I felt like, okay, I'm stepping outside of my box. I can take those risks. I don't have a classroom, but I'm helping people with classrooms. And for context, my bachelor's degree is in elementary education, and my master's degree is in curriculum and instruction. So we've always, like in my spheres, like the coaches have had that classroom experience, but we also have the curriculum and the consulting as well. And that's what we're going to talk about today. My current role, as I mentioned earlier, is that I am an industry executive at Microsoft. So that is my job title, where essentially if there's a super, a CTO, a principal, and maybe some other key players in a room, and they all want solutions, I support sales conversations to kind of figure out how technology can elevate curriculum and not just leave curriculum at the same spot. I also manage our Microsoft Innovative Education Experts, or MIE experts, and our showcase schools. And I also do a lot with like strategic planning with school districts if they want to use technology to really enhance curriculum. So I love it because I'm able to use my coaching experience where I worked with one school directly and 5 schools tangentially. And now I'm in about 15 states. So I'm scaling big, but I love it. And it's so much fun. I'm also really cognizant about how I appear outside of work. So I am a Walt Disney World annual pass holder. We go all the time. I've even given webinars from Walt Disney World. I am a Real Housewives of New York super fan. So if any of y'all watch like Bravo TV or any of those things, I love the Real Housewives of New York. Favorite TV show. And then I'm also a bread lover. I love to cook and bake, and the kitchen is truly my maker space. But that's more than enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about instructional coaching all up, because the question that I used to get most frequently when I was an instructional coach, and even when I transitioned, was, so what is your job exactly? What exactly do you do whenever you work? What is your job? How do you do your job? And I think that that's really important to address head on, Because speaking from experience, when I was in the classroom in those both spaces, South Carolina, Charleston area, and Washington, Tacoma area, I had an instructional coach when I was in Charleston, and she and I had a very strong relationship. But to this day, I cannot really pinpoint from the educator lens what she did. She said she was there to support teachers, which I respect, and she definitely did. But there wasn't really like a case use of how can she be helpful on the day-to-day / how can she be helpful to the school at large. I wasn't clear about the services that she could offer unless I directly went to her, or if a need came up and then it was kind of like chaos time, right? I had something I needed to figure out and I needed help. What I kind of took from that situation is there's a wealth of resources that are available in our schools, but sometimes as educators, we just don't even know what's available. The other half that I've experienced as well when I was in Tacoma was we had a coach where, again, not really sure what the duties were, but it was almost overstepping, where they were in certain classrooms instead of others, where certain people were always being watched or evaluated and others were not. So when I think about equity and instructional coaching, which is why this presentation came to be, we have to be equitable with our practices. I don't think it's okay to not be aware of the services that a coach can have in a school. And I also don't think it's okay for a coach to only be in certain rooms all the time, always, and to be kind of targeting certain educators based off of skill or years of experience or even what they're doing in their classrooms. The middle ground is equity. And that's why we're here. And that's what we're going to talk about with respect to this job. So if we think about instructional coaching all up, right, what is your job exactly? Here's what an instructional coach does. Oops, there we go. So if you're interested in instructional coaching, or maybe if you are a coach, or even if you're just kind of here to hear a little bit more, at the end of the day, the instructional coach provides these 6 scaffolds for educators. First and foremost, it is going to be that mentoring. If you've got new teachers, and I actually did this in my last school site, we had a new teacher connection group where there were teachers that were either new to education, period, or they were new to the building. And essentially the mentoring came from how can we support each other? How can we uplift each other? How can we share what we're doing in our classrooms? And what does it mean to be a supportive environment? And out of our 9 new teachers, 8 attended every single week. And I think that that's really powerful that we had that group and we had that support. And that comes from mentoring. Even though I did not have as many years under my belt as the other instructional coach I was working with, we both were able to leverage our kind of like strengths, but also our expertise in order to support the people that we had, which was delightful. We also, of course, provide that instructional support. So if a teacher comes to me and if they say, hey, I want to do a lesson on fractions, I have no idea where to start. Or, hey, I'm new to teaching Algebra 1 and I'm not exactly sure what the parabola thing is. Or even, hey, I want to incorporate STEM into my ELA classroom. How does that work? We provide that instructional support. Now, I will preface this by saying sometimes we don't have all of the instructional support, but we at least have the resources and the know-how to get to where we need to be. So since my background is STEM, whenever humanities teachers would come to me, I would do my due diligence on my end to research as much as I could to make sure I was giving them proper resources and information, because humanities was not in my wheelhouse. It is now. But at the time when I first started, I really had to do a lot of research to make sure that I wasn't leaving people out in the lurch. We do co-teaching and modeling lessons, especially if a teacher wants to see what things look like from an instructional lens. So I've done co-teaching and modeling for technology lessons in particular. I've done it for WeVideo, great platform. I've also done it for Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, also Google Docs, Google Slides. I've done a little bit of everything, but essentially what we do is we model these lessons for educators, and we can also co-teach alongside them if they don't feel comfortable doing an all-up lesson by themselves. That also comes from researching, curating, and creating those resources alongside the people that we work with. So again, if an educator comes to me and says, hey, I need help with this fractions lesson, I'm really not sure where to start, they might be working with us to see what it would take to take a lesson from the ground all the way to the cliff. And that looks like sometimes meeting during planning periods. Sometimes that's PLC. Sometimes that's just via email if they don't have time. But we are actively creating resources together. And that is where the magic happens with coaching, because we've got that relationship with the teacher instead of just kind of fleetingly saying, hey, here's my sources, bye. We're connecting and we're collaborating together. And then the last two is that we also run PD. I used to do a couple different types of PD. It was whole building where I might have an hour and I do that. I also used to do what I called 20-minute snack size PD. So that was PD that was typically at the end of the day, right before school ended. Teachers could pop by, learn a new tool, learn something new, learn a new instructional strategy, and then be on their merry way after contract hours. And then something that we also do as well is we really are that liaison between the admin and the teachers. We are always supposed to be on the side of the teachers unless there's a concern where the teacher or the student is harming themselves. That's when I step in because my red alarm is going off and I have to bring it to more attention. But that liaison is something where I can say, I spoke with teachers, right? Not naming names or not naming departments. And they're wondering if maybe we could have like a bell schedule. Or, I spoke with these grade levels, like let's say maybe grade levels 6 through 8. And they're wondering if maybe you could do like a morning meeting message in the morning. Nothing is vindictive, nothing is malicious, nothing is bad, but they'll kind of put bugs in your ear and you can give these tips to administration anonymously. So that way they can pick up on it and say, okay, this is how I can change my school for the better. So sometimes you're that middle ground, and that middle ground can also really help. So this is the all up. This is what an instructional coach does. But when I think about overall changes to instructional coaching, especially during COVID / now that we're kind of in this weird post-COVID, not really world, there have been challenges and changes that we have encountered in the coaching world. And when I was building out this session and thinking about how my role specifically had changed, these were the 5 that immediately jumped out. The first is relationship building. I was hired in the middle of 2020 during COVID, where in Washington State, we were all remote. I was at a new school. Teachers didn't know me. Kids didn't know me. And we were on Zoom. So I would show up in classrooms to do not necessarily evaluations because that wasn't my job, but I would show up and I would do just kind of like, hey, let's touch base. Let's have a conversation. Kids unmute their mic, lady, where they type in the chat box, I'm not sure who this is, stranger danger. That relationship building for teachers was a little bit more concrete because they knew I worked there. But part of being a coach is that you're also very visible to kids. And when you're visible to kids, then you're able to see just kind of how they interact with their teachers and also what the vibe of the classroom is. You can't really have that when you're remote or hybrid in the same way that you're in person. It doesn't mean that it can't be done. But what it does mean is that you have to switch up the way that it looks like. So relationship building does look a little different. Also, what I found is that finding these shared times to meet and collaborate with teachers and admin looks different. So when we were fully remote, I had my standing meetings knowing that like class time was 8 to 12 and then office hours were 1 to 3. When we went fully back in person, the schedule that I had already built out was now null and void, because now everything was changing. So these shared times that I had are now gone. So now what does it mean to collaborate and meet when we don't have that anymore? Same with connecting with teachers on student needs. If we have our standing time, we now have to switch that. And I just don't know how that's equitable, given that sometimes you're pulled into an IEP or 504, or sometimes you've got this meeting, and that is completely fine. And that's part of the job. But it's also something where we need to make sure we're being equitable with our time, because I don't want it to be where a teacher has been trying to meet with me for 3 weeks and it just doesn't happen. Sometimes that does happen. And I'll show you some strategies I've used to mitigate that. But that is a challenge. 2 of the last challenges as well are data collection and also integration of technology and technology tools and support. So as an instructional coach, some of your duties do include, hey, how are the kids doing? How are the teachers doing? Are they turning things in? What are the overall grades? Who needs the most support? That's kind of on like a granular grade level. And we all know that the grade book doesn't show you everything that goes on with a kid, but it is kind of telling if a kid has zeros in all of geometry, but is getting A's in all of English too. Just things to keep in mind. We do kind of look at those data collection elements. And then that integration of tech tools and tech support is also something I really leaned into when I was a coach, because oftentimes, the admin is busy, educators are also busy. Since you're that liaison, you are the person in the middle that sometimes handles this. So I've got some strategies that can help you with that as well. We all know over the last 2 years, tech integration was kind of a necessity. We want to make sure, of course, this is also my bias coming through as somebody that loves technology, that technology is being used to elevate instruction instead of just keeping it at that ground level. So these are challenges overall that I have encountered when I was a coach. And then when I think about that, my first instinct goes to, I see the inequities all over the place. I really do. I see inequity with communication. I see inequity when it comes to collaboration. I see inequity when it comes to who might be visited more than others. I see inequity when it comes to how tools or resources might be vetted. And since this is all part of coaching, one of my big missions, especially when I got hired as an instructional coach in 2020, was I need to make sure that this is equitable. I want to make sure that educators know that when they come to me, they understand that I am a dedicated resource to them. I want to make sure that when educators come to me, they know that it is a safe space. I also want educators to know that I'm not just going, even though my background is STEM, I'm not just going to the same math or science or engineering classrooms. I want to be in everybody's room. I want us to have a somewhat of an open door policy where if I pop up, they don't think that something is wrong. They want me to be there because they're excited for me to see what's going on in their room. So when I thought about how we can make coaching equitable, I really thought about what I did that was successful and what I did that wasn't, where I thought, okay, well, now I need to pivot and then try to see if I can make it successful. And these were kind of the broad changes that happened during remote, that ended up staying when I was in person. So during remote and hybrid, these are things that I kind of picked up on. Then I was like, okay, I can see this happening in like a real deal in-person environment. And the first is just changes in schedule and meeting expectations when it comes to our calendars. I cannot expect and nobody can expect really for anyone's schedule to be the same day to day, week to week, month. So if you say that you can meet every Tuesday at 12 p.m. during your planning, but then maybe an IEP or 504 was scheduled during that time that you have to attend. For example, you just need a break. You need to grade. Things are hard. I don't want to, be knocking on your door trying to figure out what's going on with you. My response is not what's happening. My response is, okay, you take the time. How can I help you? What is the next step? What are the changes that we're going to make to our schedule? That way we are finding mutually agreed upon time. And what I've done as well, and I'll show you the log that I've used. I actually keep a log of who needs the most support based off of meetings that I have. And if I go through like a week or two without meeting with somebody or checking in on somebody, I adjust my schedule personally to make sure that I go back and I meet with them. So that's kind of a way not only for me to just make sure that I've got face time with everybody, that way they know that I'm a resource for them and I'm available, but also that I'm not spending too much time in one space. There are some educators that might need more support than others, but at the same time, everybody is worthy of being checked in on. So just making sure that those expectations and flexibility are there is good. Relationship building, of course, has also changed. There are some teachers that I meet with right now that are not comfortable meeting in person, even though we might live in the same town and some of them are blocks away from me. I respect that. It's COVID. It's scary. So if you want to meet via Microsoft Teams or Google Meet or Zoom or whatever your school prefers, I'm there for you. If you want to meet, maybe via email correspondence before we meet virtually, I'm there for you. If you also want to meet in person, we'll show up with our masks and sit socially distanced. I'm there for that too. So whatever we can do to build relationships in a way that is comfortable with the educator, that is the key. Never make anybody feel uncomfortable for something that they don't want to do. And sometimes coaching is uncomfortable. Because if you don't set up those parameters with the educators before about what kind of services you can offer, when a member of administration, and technically coaching is not admin, but they are pulled into a lot of admin conversations. If they are in your room, sometimes your alarm bells go off and you think, oh my goodness, did I do something wrong? Or like, oh my goodness, is like something wrong with my job? Am I going to get fired? That relationship building from the onset is crucial. So find a way that makes it work for the people that are around you. Student attendance and assignment collection also tangentially affects the job, not as much as the relationships and the meeting with teachers, but there are moments where you are called to check in on students or excuse me, like maybe if there's like an assignment collection issue, if you're looking at the grade book, you're kind of figuring out where kids are. Sometimes if admin is busy, you might be pulled to just kind of check in on a kid or kind of bring a kid from point A to point B. I never minded that because that was also a way for me to engage with students. There were quite a few students that knew that my room always had Reese's peanut butter cups because I love Reese's peanut butter cups. So if there was a change in student attendance, I would pop by, and then maybe a student would say hi. And I'd say, hey, if you want to stop by my office later on, be more than welcome. My office is open. You can absolutely come by and say hello to me. Now, I did find that my relationships with students are different than a teacher's relationships with students. However, sometimes you can have an effect on whether or not a kid comes to school, the same way that you would as if you were an educator or as an administrator. That was powerful for me. Kids coming to my room to say hi to me and saying, I'm so happy to see you here. I know that you were out yesterday. I didn't think you were going to be here today. I know you were sick or I know you were on vacation and I'm so happy. That is powerful. So you still have that impact the same way where you were really if you're in a classroom or if you're an administrator. It's a great median. And then same with assignment collection, sometimes even being a coach and sitting next to a kid, asking what they're doing in the classroom, asking if they need any support. We come from education. So sometimes if a teacher comes in because they want extra help, we can be that extra help. And that is fantastic. And then I know I mentioned before, I'm going to mention again, tech support is also a big part of this too. If you're not techie, that's okay. A lot of the coaching with tech support I did was learn on the go because I've always just, done, hey, Victoria, my smartboard isn't working. Come down the hall with my grade level. Now that I'm working with 38 teachers, I need to make sure that my energy is dispersed properly. So I will show you just kind of how I looked at tech support in a few moments. But these are changes that really shifted during remote and hybrid that I kept during in person because it stuck. I'm a big believer in when you give people options and they appreciate those options, they usually don't like those options being taken away. So why not go for it? And then when I also think too about potential solutions, and this is kind of like the resources I'm going to share with y'all in a moment, keeping clear logs on communication and conversations with teachers and administrators really helps you define where you're allocating the most time. If you are meeting with the same math teacher every single week and you're not meeting with any other teams or really any other teachers on the math department, it might be time to spread your knowledge and spread your wealth. If you're not meeting with anybody, via a specific team, and this was actually how I realized I'm not spending enough time with PE. Now, PE or physical education is not necessarily a subject where people think that you need instructional coaching, but they were trying to integrate more STEM into their PD. And that was an area where I could provide support where I was realizing I wasn't meeting with the PE team. So what I did was once a week, I went and I played with those kids. We did volleyball together. We did pickleball together. And I love pickleball. We did badminton together. I loved it. And that was not only a way for me to get to connect with the kids and the teachers, but it was a way for me to show to the PE teachers that I cared. I'm not just here as a dedicated resource because I have to be. I'm here as a dedicated resource because I'm dedicated to y'all. Same with the art teacher. Same with the librarian or the media specialist. I'm there because I want to be there. And if I'm finding I'm not meeting with enough people or the people that I'm like, I haven't been there in a while, communication logs are very helpful for that. Those common times to have those standing meetings and those office hours are also very helpful. We know schedules fluctuate, but what I've done is I have standing hours for my educators where let's say it's 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday. They know that my office is open. They know that they can come see me. They know they can come find me. They know that there's Reese's peanut butter cups in my office. They're more than welcome to come by and say, hey, sometimes they just want to talk or vent. Sometimes there's a solution that we're like working towards. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I like to have that common time, regardless of what might be going on in their schedule. We also have our very fun, super awesome team building exercises with our staff that I try to do in an authentic way. So not in a way that's kind of patronizing, in a way that makes sense for what's going on in our school. So I'm very big on that in an authentic way, because community does not come from proximity. Community comes from me getting to know somebody. I also do surveys for professional development and enrichment, just to make sure that I'm giving the right content to the people around me. If they don't want a OneNote demo, I'm not going to give a OneNote demo. If they want a PowerPoint demo, I will do a PowerPoint demo. So I always try to make sure that these surveys and what I'm doing is relevant to what our teachers are doing. And then my favorite one, which I'll show you, this is the last one, but vetting resources equitably and with the appropriate teams. Sometimes we're just kind of given tech tools and resources as schools, and sometimes teachers don't use them. Sometimes they do. It is very dependent on school, but it is important for us to vet those resources and see what it looks like to kind of put that in front of our students. So speaking of putting it in front of our students, since y'all are the participants today, what we're going to do is we're going to check it out. So as I go ahead and I transition to this, I'm going to show you 3 different things today. The first is going to be the sample coaching menu, because I found this instrumental when I first began. If a coach does not know what, or rather, if an educator doesn't know what the coach has to offer, then the relationship is going to start off on the wrong foot immediately. So I'm going to share with you my sample coaching menu which Dr. Alexander also has. I also have my conversation tracker for educational technology, which Dr. Alexander also has, which she will share with you as well. And then something that I also created internally, which I have myself. This is really specific to schools that I've worked in. So I don't know if y'all would like to use it. If you want to, you can reach out afterwards and I'd be happy to share it. It is just kind of my selecting tech tools checklist. I was in a school, I've always been in schools that have been very diverse. And as I go ahead and I bring this up for the coaching menu, what was interesting about the first and last schools, all of it that I worked at, was a lot of the tools that we were looking at, it was more instructional based and not necessarily based in strategy. So a principal might say, I want everybody to use code.org, but like if I'm teaching humanities, how do I use code.org? You know, where's the strategy there? Where's the intent? Same with like if I'm a STEM teacher and you want me to use Newsella. Okay, well then what is the expectation for me to use it? So this kind of kicked off what that looked like with the instructional coaching menu. I created this when I started, and this is draft 2. The first draft looked way different during hybrid and remote, honestly, because we couldn't have visitors in the room. We couldn't do networking. We couldn't have classroom guests. We weren't really doing reflection. I think we all know 2020 was straight survival. So I created this new one in 2021 for my hybrid and in-person environment in order to make sure that the needs of my teachers were being met. So thinking about this on a tactical level, let's go through. We've seen coaching and choice boards for kids where they've got a multitude of options. And I've also done this when I was in the classroom. I called it think-tac-toe, where there were 9 boxes like tic-tac-toe, and then they either go diagonal, horizontal, or vertical, or sometimes if I was being nice, I'd let them choose 3 random, and that would be the tic-tac-toe. I view the instructional coaching menu as the same thing. And I've done this 3 different ways. The first is that if you take a look, there are 9 different options. They range from brainstorming, where if they have an idea they want to talk about, let's talk about it, let's think about it, let's brainstorm together, to curriculum planning, where if you're a new teacher and you're handed this curriculum guide and you've got no idea where to start, let's start mapping that out. From networking, which in K-12 education, there's not a lot of that until you get to high school. But I view networking as sometimes you need a guest speaker, which to me is different from a classroom guest. Classroom guest means that I am visiting and I'm checking out the cool things in your room. Networking means I match you up with a volunteer or industry professional. So that way, if you need help throughout the course of the year, like if you are teaching 5th grade science and your whole year focuses on ecosystems and the environment, let's hook you up with somebody from Tacoma Utilities, or let's hook you up with someone from Point Defiant Zoo. You know, there are a lot of adults that are open to sharing with kids. And that's where that networking piece comes in, all the way down to like PD, data, reflection sessions, right? Just ways that I can provide assistance. So in the beginning of the year, what I do when I introduce myself to educators, I share this to everybody in the school. This is how I can be of service to you. I'm a dedicated resource, again, not because I'm physically here, but because I want to be here. So these are the services that I can offer. Let me know how I can do that for you. Something else that I also point out is this is flexible. So these are just the 9 that I came up with based off of prior experiences as a coach, and then also with coaches in schools that I've worked with. If there's something that they need in addition, I'll add it here and we're able to make it work that way. So that's number 1. Number 2 is if I'm meeting with a new teacher or maybe an existing teacher and they might be struggling, I'll bring up the coaching menu, and then what we'll do together is we'll kind of figure out what the best method is to move forward. And then we enter a coaching cycle, which is anywhere between like 3 to 4 weeks. We meet weekly, we touch base with each other. I'm in their classroom about once or twice a week. And, we just kind of see the growth and we figure out what we can do to make the classroom more successful. And something I found really interesting about that is when I give options, right? Sometimes people don't know what they don't know. So if I'm a coach and if I go to a teacher and I'm like, I'm a coach, here's how I can help, they don't know what that means, especially if they're new or maybe if they're being challenged. Sometimes being in the classroom, as y'all know, it is so overwhelming. And I'm just trying to get my head straight. Even though I have this resource here, I don't know how to ask for help. So this is really good for that. And then the third is I've done tic-tac-toe challenges with educators during certain times where, like it's all left, right, all right, all horizontal, diagonal, whatever they want to do, where I'm like, let's see how you can utilize instructional coaching and an instructional coach with this resource. That way, how I am available to you. I found that when I implemented this, leaps and bounds better than just saying, let me know how I can help. Because let me know how I can help, again, if you don't have it, like if you don't know what you need to do to help, or if you don't even have the help that you need, it can be an extremely overwhelming question. So sometimes giving people options can also be overwhelming, but it's better than just saying, let me know how I can help, right? So this is my instructional coaching menu. Please feel free to use. Please feel free to share. This is a resource for y'all, especially if you're starting out or if you're looking for coaching roles. This is a hit. So please utilize the instructional coaching menu. On top of that, so once you kind of share this with people and they're interested in beginning to work with you and they're rubbing your elbows and they're like, hey, you might want to come to my classroom and check out this cool lesson, or like, hey, you might want to come by my classroom because I want some feedback, or hey, let's meet so I can talk about this new curriculum initiative. I was finding that all my meetings were not being tracked automatically. I was at a school that was using Zoom. So no disrespect to Zoom, but Zoom is not really calendar integrated the same way that other LMSs are. So I needed a way to track who I was speaking to. It wasn't the same as Google Meet, and it wasn't the same as Microsoft Teams, where all of these things were being tracked. So I needed a system. And this was my system. I created a conversation tracker where essentially I was keeping track of who I was speaking to, what we talked about, and what our next steps action items were. Because the worst thing that you want to happen is for you to be meeting with a teacher and then the conversation goes nowhere, because then the collaboration stops. So what I did with this conversation tracker was every single time I met with somebody, I'd have their name. Obviously, I want to know who I talked to. I have the date that I met with them, because I also want to know when I met with them. I want to see if there are patterns. Are we meeting every Monday? Are we meeting every Wednesday? Because then I can kind of track and see, okay, this person is available mostly on Mondays. This means that my meetings are about to be on Monday. Or, hey, I'm meeting with Courtney every single Monday. Then that essentially means that I'm meeting with Courtney every Monday. And I do know that sometimes, and I see in the chat that this is like different for each district. But when I think about my district, they were a little behind the times. I have been in spaces where it is integrated, which is fantastic. But in my last school district, I was like, there's no processes here. So what I did was I created a process, and thankfully this is still in tow there, which is great. So I got the name, I got the date, contact info. So sometimes teachers will reach out to me via text message. They've got my phone. Yes, I still do use an iPhone with a button. So they've got my contact info, whether it's via text, via email. Maybe we met on like a Zoom or like a, like digital platform or something. I always try to track because sometimes that shows how the person is most preferred to be contacted. So I know personally, I'm not a big fan of phone calls unless I absolutely have to take one. I much prefer to do video chat, email, or text message. I am a millennial, so I think that has something to do with it. But for me, when I think of contact info, I'm like, okay, I met with this person 10 times via Google Meet. Google Meet might be their preferred. Or, hey, this person texted me 5 times about the same thing. Now I know I can go to that person for that. Same with method of contact. And then our purpose of our meeting is just kind of what did we talk about? And then on top of that as well, my action items. So again, we don't want to leave a meeting without action items, because if we don't have that, what that means is the collaboration might stop. The goal of coaching is to have that growth over the course of the year. So if I leave without action items, and if my teacher leaves without action items, then we don't know where to go. So I'll give you an example back to the fractions. Let's say that Courtney contacted me on May 7th, 2022 via Google Meet because she wanted to talk about a fraction lesson. So purpose of the conversation, if I'm going all the way from left to right, Courtney Johnson contacted me on May 7th, 2022 via Google Meet. And the purpose was she was really struggling with figuring out what she was going to do with her fractions lesson. That fractions lesson was focused on, let's say, adding like fractions. Let's say that during our conversation, we went over a couple of different methods for adding like fractions. Then in my action items column, I would have action items. Courtney would have action items. My action items might be stop by Courtney's classroom next Tuesday on, let's say, like the 10th or the 11th. I don't have my calendar up, but y'all get the gist. To see like what she's implementing for adding like fractions. Courtney's action item might be, I am going to try 2 out of the 4 strategies that we spoke about during this conversation. And then when Victoria comes into my room, there's a very likely chance that she will see 1 out of the 2 that I was able to kind of figure out what I needed. So this conversation tracker is helpful just internally. If your school keeps like Power BI, for example, I think is awesome for that. Like Google Analytics is also very good to figure out how much time you're spending in meetings, who you're meeting with. This does give you some more tactical information about that. So this conversation tracker, again, I think is just phenomenal when it comes to not only data tracking, but also who you're meeting with. Because if I'm finding I'm meeting with Courtney every so often, then that might mean that Courtney might need more support than I can offer. As an instructional coach, also be mindful of your bandwidth only goes so far. You've got a lot of teachers that you also have to work with. So maybe sometimes I'll direct Courtney to resources on GeoGebra, which is a wonderful resource for math educators. Maybe I'll direct her to National Geographic, which also has a lot of great resources and PD for educators. So it just gives ways for you to spread your bandwidth. And the last thing before we do questions is our technology tools checklist and reflection. I did not share this because this was real specific to basically where I was working at the time. Again, if you're interested, I'm more than happy to share. The reason why I didn't put it on the list is because my role was a little bit of everything, including tech and STEM coaching. Sometimes as an instructional coach, you don't deal with that. So if you are ever in that role, hit me up and let me know. If you're not, then you can disregard what I'm saying right now. But what I was finding was in a very diverse school with a diverse educator population, so many of our tools did not reflect our students and our educators, where all of the stock photography was of blonde white children. And I'm obviously not white, and I'm obviously not blonde. Several of the students and teachers that I worked with were the exact same way. And we kind of looked as a faculty and said, this has got to end. So we created a selecting technology tools checklist, not only for educators, but also for students, because we wanted for educators and kids to see themselves in whatever they were using. That was crucial to me as a coach, because if you don't see yourself in it, then I don't really know how you can fully teach it or understand it. So we did a checklist for educators first, and you'll notice that we have various indicators with whether or not the tool aligns with outcomes for students, with whether or not the diverse content in quotation marks is gate kept by paywall or locks. My last workplace had a saying for me: if it ain't free, it ain't me, because I really dislike whenever I have to pay out the wazoo for content. We also talked about how tools provide a wide array of gender representation, racial identity representation. Does it have accessibility features? Can they communicate clearly? And then you'll notice at the bottom right here, it's empty because we actually created an indicator ourselves, right? So based off of the climate and the culture of the school, we created one ourselves. You'll notice that there's 3 different rankings here: 1, 2, and 3. 1 is low, 2 is middle, and 3 is high. I find that keeping it 1 to 3 makes it consistent, because I know even when I'm an adult, like if I were at my home office, you would see me in my Disney themed home office that has the red background and all the pictures and whatnot. And, we're Disney pass holders. We go all the time. And I often get feedback surveys that says, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your trip to Walt Disney World. And I'm thinking, okay, what's the difference between like a 7 and an 8? Or an 8 and a 9? It's not completely clear when you have all of these criteria. So I do find that 1 to 3 is nice and clean. 1 is low, 3 is high, 2 is right in the middle. So there's no discrepancy. And then there's comments off to the right-hand side in case additional commentary needs to be made. We do the same thing with kids, right? Do they understand how to use that tool? Does it provide representation of gender, race, identity? Can I get my work done? Can I collaborate with others, right? All these soft skills that we want for kids to do. This is something I facilitated as a coach. When I go into rooms and the tech really isn't being used, then why do we have the tech? What is the purpose of having this here? So I created a method so that way we could see what that looks like. And then I don't do a reflection all up for the kids, because sometimes they're like, Mrs. Thompson, I don't need another piece of paper. I'm like, all right, whatever. But for the educators, I do find that this is super beneficial. So once they're using the tool in their classroom, what we do is we reflect on the questions in sentences below. So essentially, what outcomes were achieved by using the tool? Was it simple for students to use and implement in and out of the classroom? Like, we had a Wii video license, and kids were like, this is really cool. So they're using it in the classroom for their videos, but at home, they're also using it for like skateboarding and whatnot, which was neat. Does the tech offer any advantages to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion? You've been with me for this hour now. You probably get a handle on how big that is for me, to make sure that we're not only inclusive with our classrooms and our schools, but also that we're being equitable with our practices. And then also, would you use this tool again in the future? Why or why not? So this directly was a reason why my district got Nearpod, because teachers were using Nearpod. They evaluated Nearpod. They found that Nearpod was a great resource for them. We were able to give the data. We presented it, and now the district has Nearpod, which is pretty cool. So just kind of ways that instructional coaches can have that impact on a district level. There are not only ways for our educators to be involved, but there are also ways for our students to be involved as well. And since we do interact with students on a fairly regular basis, it is phenomenal. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I will hop over to the very last slide, which essentially has my thank you and my contact information, and we will turn it over to questions. So I'm going to take it right over here. We have our thank you. When I get home, I will be renewing my personal 365 subscription. I'm sitting here, I'm like, I can't believe I missed that, but we were on the road, so I get it. But again, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. If you are looking into instructional coaching and you were curious about this topic, if you are an instructional coach and you wanted to know how to make things a little more equitable, if you want to just kind of see what the coaching landscape looks like, I really appreciate your time here today. And again, this was my first EA webinar. And Dr. Alexander, I have a feeling it will not be my last. If anybody wants to contact me, again, this is my Twitter handle. It is at Victoria the Tech. Again, feel free to reach out, ask questions, do anything. And then my personal email is right there at Victoria Rose Thompson. It is my full name at gmail.com. So let me know again if you've got questions, if you are looking to transition, feel free to reach out. I am more than happy to help because I've been in that space where I was, classroom and coach. Let me know how I can be of service to you. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Alexander for some Q&A.
So we have a question from Ashley. How do you convince teachers to use a new tech tool?
Ooh, that's a great question, actually. So I actually did this a couple of different ways in my last place. And then, of course, now he's getting up here. I'll take off his collar. Ren was just so enthralled by this question that he decided to get up and say hi to everybody too. So I've actually gone about this a couple of different ways based off of the different teachers that I've had in my school and also different landscapes as well. So thing number one that I've done is I have always implemented what I refer to as tech talk. Sometimes during professional development, it is scary for a teacher to kind of test out a new tool. And sometimes they don't want to be talked to. So what I did was I kind of used it as office hours where, hey, this is 1 hour, no harm, no foul. You come and you learn alongside me. And the key was I used a tool or tools, plural, where I had never used them before. So for example, I've done that before with News Ella. So we had a license for that, I want to say 6 years ago at the first school that I worked at. I also left that school because we moved out to Seattle. So I maybe had like a smooth 2 weeks of using it before we moved. So I was like, okay, we're all going to come, learn News Ella. We're also all going to come and use Cami. We're also like now going to come and use Bunsy. So tools that I have either used minimally, with the exception of Bunsy, because I use that all the time. And then also tools that I've never used before, where we kind of learn together and we're in a safe space where they're not being talked at. We're doing it alongside of each other. Those were a hit. And I found that out because it's no harm, no foul. They're just coming to learn. They're not necessarily learning to be, or coming rather to be talked at. So that's number one. Thing number two is that I also pre-recorded webinars, like I call them snack size, anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes, where it's like, okay, you don't know how to use record in PowerPoint. Let me show you how to use it. You don't know how to use Immersive Reader. Let me show you how to use it. So, and I also made those readily available on our LMS. So at the time we were using Canvas. So I would put them on the Canvas, that way teachers could use them. That was also a good way of using the tech tool. And then another thing that I also did just for my personal buy-in was I utilized these tools whenever I was giving PD or working with teachers. So if they came to me and they said, like this sounds great, like Track sounds great, but I feel like it would be really overwhelming. Whenever I was in their room, I would model it and I would coach it with them. So that way it wasn't as scary. They've already got someone that knows how to utilize it. So they know that they can come to me as a resource if they need it. I'd say that the tech talk was the most successful because they're also with their peers and they're all figuring it out by themselves too. So something really unique I think about that was, even though I'm kind of the one facilitating the PD, they were the ones that's like, oh my gosh, I just pressed this button and this happened. And then suddenly everyone's coming over to that table. And I mean, it was just magical. So yeah, those were the ways that I convinced teachers to use the new tech tools.
What are your thoughts on instructional coaches presenting in common planning PLCs on a regular basis? Is it a meeting you insert yourself into, or do you wait to be asked to join and assist?
Right. Ren, you and I have opinions on that one, don't we, bud? Because when we were remote, sometimes I would pop and, hey, where's your dog? And I'm like, nope, I'm out of here. So the reason why I say that is because I strongly believe that PLCs are for the educators. I do not join in on a PLC. And I actually left administration, left an administration where they wanted us to be in PLCs regularly, and I refused because I feel like if I'm there, it's not going to be an authentic conversation that happens on the regular. What I did though was, let's say that we have 2 PLCs a month. Let's say that, actually, let's do it over the course of 2 months because I feel like that's a little bit more reasonable. So if there's 2 PLCs a month, then there's 4 over the course of 2 months. 3 would be for educators all up just to meet. And then 1 would be to touch base with me, give information, we can collaborate on anything. I really view the PLC as that sacred space because at the first school that I worked at, all of our PLCs were regulated by our instructional coach. And it just really didn't feel authentic to me. I felt like I was always watching or being watched rather, because even though our instructional coach was on the side of the teachers, we're still going up to the main office to meet. We're still meeting in her office. It didn't seem real to me. So I am not present outside of just like, everybody here? Cool. See you later. And then I leave. I do have a standing meeting with PLCs, once every two months just to kind of check in. However, if I am asked to join, I will absolutely join. I think that that's very honorable that they trust me to be in that sacred space. So anytime a team asks me to join, I always say yes, and I will make time. If they don't ask me, I don't be there besides taking attendance and then running away. I do want to touch base on what Tanner said real quick, if we have a second. So just, it's important to really keep that same energy as like, this is a sacred space when you are technically the one that is, overseeing and with teachers, where we want to always be on their side. And that also means giving them the space to create and collaborate where they're not constantly being watched. So it definitely sets that professional boundary in the space. And then it also gives them time to flourish, but they know that they can come to you whenever they need it.
Thank you so much. This was such a good session to just kind of sit and think about instructional coaching, to get resources for instructional coaches. Just seriously, thank you so much. And I do ask that you share that last resource, and I'm going to add it to the resource sheet, the one that
sure.
How students can get in with sharing the tech tool. And please share that. I'm going to put it right there on the list of resources. Thank you so much for spending time with us and giving us these just amazing things to think about, to plan for. We have people in the chat going, I'm helping my instructional coaches. This is exactly what they needed. So it was great. It was exactly what we needed when we needed it. And I just thank you so, so much.
Awesome. Yeah. So this was the first time I actually gave this session. So this is just energizing me so much. And I'm so happy that y'all are taking good things from, like what I've done in previous institutions, what I'm doing now. This is phenomenal.